welcome to Kica's Corner. My name is Kica Matos, and I am your host. On this show, we talk about our community, our state, our nation, and the world. But we always do it through a social justice lens. So let us get started. Our topic today is periods. Yes, again, for those of you who tune in to the show on the regular, recall that back in the spring, we did a show about period poverty, and we talked about how expensive menstruating products are and the efforts underway to fix this problem at the state level, in our nation, and around the world. Today, we're going to talk about this amazing new book that's going to be published by Simon & Schuster in 11 days. To be exact, it's going to be published on November 1. The book is about periods. It is powerful and amazing. And it is written by an author who is a New Havener. So what? She's here with us today. Let me do a little bit of framing. For a long time, talking about periods has been taboo. Even the very word period has been problematic for some people, so much so that there are a number of different ways that people refer to when they talk about periods, including and flow, time of the month, being on the rag, crimson tide, moon cycle, the list goes on and on. And if you Google period like I did yesterday, things show up like, quote, how to explain a period to a boy, and quote, how to have the period talk. The silence around periods has had a really negative effect on those who menstruate. They're embarrassed to talk about it. They're embarrassed to be menstruating and ashamed when they cannot afford period products. Our guest on today's show decided to do something about it over a decade ago by publishing a book called My Little Red Book. At the time, she was a freshman in college. My Little Red Book included about 90 short stories about first-time periods from a diversity of voices and ages, ranging from age 15 to 101. And I'm really excited to say that the book quickly became a New York Times bestseller. In 11 days, a version of this book is going to come out. It's a new one, and it's called Our Red Book. And it's been described as, quote, a people's history of menstruation, told through an array of perspectives and identities that span the globe. Gathered over 20 years, the collection takes stock of our shifting relationships to family, cultural inheritance, gender, aging, and liberation. Rachel Kauder, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor, and it's so right to start off here in New Haven. My book tour, because this book is a community project really at its heart.
So let us first, because this is a radio station in New Haven, I really want to just uplift and establish your New Haven credentials. Yes. Born in New Haven, raised in New Haven, to New Haven parents, is that right?
That's right. And yeah, this project really started in town very locally, because it started as a family oral history project, really with my own mom's family, after we heard a very shocking story about my great aunt who actually got her first period on her journey fleeing Nazi-occupied Poland while being strip searched. She was Jewish, and so it was just this incredibly traumatic moment in her personal history, and she had never shared this history until I was a teenager. And this sort of prompted a huge amount of talking in my own family, and my mom and I, who were, living in New Haven, we are living in New Haven, started asking ourselves, how could we encourage more families to open up with each other about these really important parts of our histories? And, for me, it gave me such a different sense of where I come from, my legacy, my heritage. And so my mom, who is a, active part of New Haven, shout out to Helen Kauder, really wanted to start with community leaders and activists in town. So Kica, you were one of the first people, I think, that she asked. This really started out as a mother-daughter project, and it's multi-generational. And so your story and Zinette Lewis's story are two of the New Haven activist stories that were printed in the first version and are also featured in this new expanded version of the book.
Can I ask you what it was that generated the original conversation between you and your aunt?
Yeah, sure. So I had just gotten my first period and I was mortified. I mean, my story to me as a 13-year-old was the worst thing that could ever happen. I was alone with my widowed grandfather. He had signed me up for water skiing lessons. He was really ashamed and never talked about what was going on, even though it was really visible that like I had had my period. I didn't know what to do. Because he was widowed, there was no one around to help me, and he just like dropped me off at a pharmacy. And I remember being so embarrassed I couldn't even summon the words to ask someone for help. And I got like an adult diaper. It was horrible. It was really bad. And I just cried the whole week while I was there. And it was just this total impasse between us generationally. He didn't have the words. And so when I came home and my mom shared this story with my female family members, my great aunt was kind of like, all right, girl, like, you think this is bad?
Let me tell you how bad it can be. Yeah.
Yeah, like let's sit down. And she told me this story, and I remember, saying, like, telling my mom, and I was like, did you know this? And she was like, no one has shared this part of our history before. And actually, then I learned that I realized my mom had never told me her story.
Mhm.
No one had ever talked about anybody's history. And for so long, that's because these stories have been taboo. And so that's thankfully changing. At least in the US, it's really opened up in the past 10 years since the first edition has come out. And so now it really feels like we're ready to invite more folks into the conversation to also understand these intimate histories and parts of who we are and where we come from.
So I want to go back to the original book and would love to have you walk us through the journey of the original book. How did you decide who to ask to share their stories? As you were editing the book, what were themes that came up that you had never thought about? And then I really want to get into what our Red Book is all about, because I think you're applying a very contemporary, really interesting lens to the new book.
Yeah, I mean, I think these stories are so personal and often so vulnerable. They require so much trust, and it's really an honor to hear them. And I hope that readers feel that when you encounter these stories on the page. And so they all happen pretty much through word of mouth. I would talk to one person and almost everyone would say, okay, my story is okay, but you really have to talk to my friend who is a twin, or
Wow.
my cousin who is blind, or I know someone who got her period on September 11th, probably because of the shock, or,
Wow.
It was really just a trail. And I have been on this trail for like 20 years and it hasn't stopped. And the stories are continually fascinating and increasingly complex as I think I grow older and can hold more complexity. And I think from doing this now for almost 2 decades, what's most amazing is just one story kind of behind the scenes. In this first edition, one of the central stories comes from Zinette Lewis, organizer in New Haven. And when I went to ask her son for permission to reprint it, he's told me, yes, of course. And Zinette's only granddaughter just got her first period. And
Oh, wow.
would you like to hear that story? And so like these amazing cross-generational narratives are happening. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of the book, actually, is because it's such a word of mouth, organic process. These very human stories behind the scenes are also unfolding.
And
Yeah.
talk to us about this new book and what the lenses that you're applying, because for those of you who are listening carefully, I have not yet mentioned girls or women, because we are now living in a very gender expansive world. I also am curious to know how many men
Yeah.
have stepped up
Yeah.
to share or offer to share their experiences. And so talk to us, Rachel, about
Yes.
why you are editing this new version. How different is it from the
Yes.
original one? And then I'm going to ask you probably an awkward question about some of your favorite stories, even though I know
Okay.
you're not going to want to talk about your favorite stories, because it's like asking you whether you have a favorite child. But
It's
talk to us
true.
about this new book.
You've brought on authors and editors before. Well, I should say that for the first edition, I was really young. I made this really as a book that would be given to a teenage girl for her first period as a gift. I was thinking about what I didn't have, what I wished I had had in that horrible week that I was alone with my grandfather. Um, and what's very interesting is after that book came out, the idea for this book happened almost immediately after that book came out. So this was 10 years ago, because the people who responded with the most interest, surprisingly, were single dads.
Oh,
They
wow.
were like, we need this.
That is amazing.
We literally don't have stories to tell. We don't know what to say. We were never educated properly. And so since then, I've just had this seed of like, oh, there's probably a whole world out there of people who really want to know and were never invited into the discourse, because our our way of raising young people, of educating young people, especially cis boys, is really lacking. And just on the like level of information, let alone arts and culture. And so this is so that's sort of where this idea for this version of the book began. Um, and also in the past 10 years, we've been talking so much more about the whole gender spectrum. And so this book really centers non-binary voices, trans voices, to kind of expand our understanding of the first period experience, of the experience of menstruators, because there's such a range of stories. And I think I think of it especially as a tool for parents to understand what possibly kids could be going through, because yeah, these stories really show you can never assume. Some of my favorite stories in the book come from New Haven trans teens who talk about the experience of like, a parent who in the best with the best intentions wants to celebrate and is so thrilled when he gets his first period, and before he even has the words around gender, right? Because he's young, he's 11.
Mhm.
He just knows in his bones this is, I think he uses the phrase, it's like a gavel slamming down, deeming me to be a woman
Oh, wow.
forever, and so it's like actually this moment of dread and weight. And so but there's not just one, trans experience. Of course, there's a whole world. And so this book has so many across ages, but those stories needed to be in a book like this. And then, yes, I think the other really important component that this book includes is perspectives from people who don't menstruate at all. So, caretakers for mothers, sons, brothers, and cis men are characters in almost all of the stories, but we almost never invite them to share their side of things. And I think that that's really the next step in finally freeing ourselves from what can be very oppressive silence, and that has real consequences. But yeah, the stories there are a couple contributors in the book who are men, and their stories are, I find them to be, one is very funny to me. It's from a dad in Mexico. It's a global collection. So this story came my way from a dad who was asked to go buy menstrual care products for his teen daughter and had never done this in his life before, even though he grew up in a household with tons of sisters. And he finds himself at the supermarket and has no idea what to buy. And there's like a whole aisle, right? And he buys everything. And his daughter, is like, Dad, I just asked you to get this one thing. And he takes you through his panic attack, and he basically realizes he's a full-grown male adult and he understands nothing about what his wife goes through, about what his daughter goes through, about what his mother and sisters have gone through. And it's almost like it's like a consciousness raising moment where he sees he's been actively like sheltered and protected in brackets from this information. And once you see that, you can't sort of unsee it. And he so yeah, I think this book is hopefully through play and sort of a gentle hand, a way to invite people who haven't learned yet about this dimension of what half the world goes through.
Are you? I know the in the world of social media and multiple ways to communicate. How are you thinking of expanding the voices of those who read this book?
Yeah, gosh, I would love your thoughts. If any listeners have thoughts, I don't know if it's because I'm old school or if it's because just the way that I've heard these stories feels is so intimate, and it's such an ancient, it feels like it's tapping into a very ancient oral history of passing down stories person to person. And so a book feels like a way that you can capture that in a way, because it's a very private experience as you're reading it. And I think some of these stories almost touch on, they tremble, they feel almost sacred. And you feel like it's like a gift to read them. And so I have struggled to figure out how to capture them on social media, because I feel like they can't really live as sound bites, but I am sharing just like little fragments and corners and single lines of stories.
Oh, wow.
And I think those just give you a sense of like the many range of voices. I can read just a couple, if that would be interesting.
That would be awesome. Please do.
Yeah, so just to give you a sense of like how I think a little corner of a story can travel and give you a sense. So a part of me felt angry that we had talked about what God expected of me as a devout adult instead of sex or periods. Here's another one. In prison, we made our own tampons from pads. Here's another one. I pondered whether my brain is a better womb than my actual uterus. Maybe giving birth to ideas rather than another human is more sustainable for this body at this time. And then lastly, for you, Kica, no, ellas no me decían nada. Taboo, taboo, taboo.
Yes.
So yes, but I these lines don't do justice to the whole story, but they just give you a sense that there are no two stories that are the same.
Very powerful words. I know, let me just say what folks are listening to. If anyone's joined us late, you're listening to Kica's Corner on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio, broadcast at 103.5 FM and live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. You are about to launch this new book, and I'm happy to say that you are centering New Haven once again in this launch. So can you talk to us about what events are coming up and how people can actually purchase this book?
Yes, I am so excited about a New Haven launch that's going to be happening November 5th, Saturday. That's a Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Institute Library. Come out. Kica is going to be reading, as are many local contributors. A lot of the teens are going to be there, which is going to be really beautiful. It's actually going to be a huge age range. I think it's going to be a really beautiful, beautiful event, ranging from 13 to someone who is not 13, much, much older.
13 and up.
13 and up.
13
And
and up.
I think folks of all genders are welcome to come listen. It's going to be funny. It's going to be intense. It's going to be educational. It's going to be joyful. I think we have 11 contributors who are able to read their stories in person. So it will almost feel, I think, a little like theatrical. And what I love most is just hearing these voices side by side. And it's going to be so amazing to hear people read their stories in their own voice. And for a lot of the teens, especially, this is going to be their first time sharing these stories in public. And so actually I keep mentioning Zanette Lewis, that her granddaughter is going to be there at the New Haven reading. So she's the youngest contributor. So I'm really highlighting her, giving her a shout out to Sophia Moore. And I hope to see everyone there, and books will be for sale there. And so it's a great chance to also support New Haven's most radical new bookstore, Possible Futures.
Oh, great.
So please come out, and it's free.
Okay. And are you going to sign books?
We will sign books. Yes. So I think it will be a reading, and then we'll have a chance to chat. So yeah, bring friends, bring your kids, bring your loved ones, bring your boyfriend who needs to learn more.
Anyone and everyone who needs a lesson about periods. Let me ask you something. In terms of the advocacy that's going on around the country and also in Connecticut, how do you envision this book playing a role in really advocating for an end to period poverty?
It's such a good question. So important, Kica. And it is happening. As your listeners know, in Connecticut, there was a bill that was introduced in the House in March of last year to make menstrual care products available in schools. And I think what I hope this book illuminates is that this world is possible. Some of the contributors who are interviewed, it's so thrilling, are the politicians and legislators who are behind the world's first policies to make menstrual care products free on a national level. Monica Lennon, who is the health minister, at the time was the health minister of Scotland, who was behind this groundbreaking policy that was just passed this year. And Scotland now has free products across the country for anyone who needs them, is interviewing about how that policy came to be. And what's so fascinating about her answer is that it starts at the grassroots level, and it's students, it's like students advocating in their high schools, at their universities, on the district level. And then you see that it scales up. And so some of the other voices in the book are teen activists. There's an amazing group in Wisconsin called Bleed Shamelessly that was especially active during the height of COVID, since the economics of that moment were especially bleak. And so people needed more products than ever, and as donations. And so I interviewed them about that. And they're actively working to combat the luxury tax, which still exists in 22 states in the US on sanitary supplies, on menstrual care products. But I think what's interesting about this book is people are at very different stages around the world in this fight. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a matter of time. And you see that, like, these people, these young teens who know that this is something that they deserve and are being told by their principals, no, you're asking for too much, you're crazy, this is never going to happen. When you read their stories right alongside someone who's in a different part of the world and is like, obviously, this is a basic human right. To not do this is discrimination. You realize this is really a global question. This is a global fight, and we're on our way. And once you encounter a perspective like this, you can't unsee it. And so it's just about the starting point has to be about knowing that this other world is not only possible, but exists at the same time. And it does exist in the US too, on different state levels. But that being said, another perspective in the book that's so important to learn more about and to pay attention to and to be aware of is the stories from the incarcerated voices, where even if technically prisons, are supposed to give everyone free products, that doesn't happen. And periods are an avenue that people specifically target, control, shame, humiliate incarcerated folks. And it's another way that we see that people are dehumanized behind bars. And so in so many ways, these stories, this didn't begin as like a social justice project, but like anything, if you just look closely enough at anything in this country, you see injustice everywhere. And so it really comes through in these accounts in a sort of sideways way. People are just talking about these intimate stories in their lives, and it becomes a very interesting embodied portrait of what it means to live in the US right now.
Thank you for that. And for those of you who are listening, again, the book reading is on Saturday, November 5th at 1 p.m., Rachel, right? At the Institute Library, which is on Chapel Street. So come on out and join what's going to be a really fun and community-oriented afternoon. We are almost out of time. So Rachel, as is my practice, I'm going to now ask you some personal questions. So are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
As a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be a psychiatrist / movie director. That didn't work out.
If you had to describe yourself using 3 words, what would they be?
I'm actually really introverted. I'm pretty shy, and I'm very emotional.
If they made a movie of your life, what would it be about, and which actor would you want to play you?
Oh my God, it definitely would be about periods. I feel like periods, birth, death, these epic cycles of life. Oh, I can't pick the celebrity. I feel like maybe it would be that unknown actor that becomes a breakout star, that local person who everyone then is like, who's that?
Good enough. Folks, unfortunately, we have come to the end of the show. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being our guest. This has been a fun conversation. I'm really excited to be joining you. And it just, for me, it's been a privilege to be included in both books. And I'm going to be really excited to share my own period story at the event on November 5th. And here, for those who are listening, please do something for the cause of justice this month. And until the next one, here is wishing you a not so cold fall and many, many days of warmth, even if it's inside. I want to give a big shout out to our amazing producer, Harry. And I hope to see you all again on Saturday, November 5th at the Institute Library at 1 p.m.
Thank you.